Hey, it's Big John R. Buy, sell, trade, and give stuff away on Swap Shop. Saturday mornings at 7 on the Talk Station.
Viewpoints on the Talk Station, FM 107, AM 1240. Joining us this afternoon, a voice you hear every Friday afternoon, but today, Wednesday, we're going to be enjoying a conversation with Dan Gainor. Of course, Dan joins us every Friday afternoon as the host of the program here on Viewpoints, but today he's coming to us. Well, we'll ask him a few issues, make a few comments about today's issues, but rather, we're going to talk about his artistic talent. And with that, Dan, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be back. Under different circumstances for change.
Far different circumstances. Let's talk about this. You've got, we all know that you enjoy writing, and in fact, you have a great interest in culture, art, entertainment, as is indicated many times by your comments and observations, your ability to recall lyrics instantly and artist. But you yourself have, shall we say, a muse.
Well, yeah, I mean, I made a New Year's Eve, resolution, not this past year, but the year before, and I largely attained it. I wanted to start writing some fiction. So I started writing some things I enjoyed. People who listen to me certainly know that I have geeky tendencies, and so I started writing short stories. And I've got one of them is published. One is soon to be published. I've got another couple that are. One just made the rounds, made it through an assignment editor and got shipped to an editor-in-chief. So I've got several that could be out. People genuinely can go on Amazon and look me up. I have an author page because I'm in a new collection of short stories that I think would probably appeal a lot to your listening audience because it's about it's future wars. The name of the book is Veterans of Future Wars. And it's a collection of short stories about different possible circumstances that take place involving the military.
All right. Now, I've got to get back to this issue here in a few moments. As I recall, you went out to an aircraft carrier for a period of time. I'm curious, did that have any relationship?
I was, God bless the Naval Institute in Annapolis. I have a former coworker of mine who works there, and they do these what they call embarks. They send various VIPs and me to different aircraft carriers, and it's designed to improve people's understanding of the Navy, but improve people's understanding of what the problems, what the issues are. And so I got a chance to fly out to the most powerful weapon on Earth, and that is the USS Bush, and named after former President Bush. It also served in the Navy, and Bush the Elder, I like to call him. And so I got this opportunity to fly out, literally land on the carrier, and catapult off the carrier, and we spent a night. So we got basically 36 hours or something on board. Got a chance to meet some of the most impressive people you'd ever want to meet. And, I mean, this is going to sound reverse. I met several admirals, because they had a dinner before we went out. There were a few admirals there. There were 3 admirals who landed on the ship with us. So, I mean, I met more than a half dozen admirals. But the people who most impressed me were the Master Chief. If he's listening into this program, Master Chief Heck, who was almost like the quintessential sergeant you see in war movies. And I told him, I said, you don't see Master Chiefs portrayed much in movies. I said, but from now on, when I see or hear the term, I will always think of him. And the Master Chief is the chief enlisted guy who keeps the sailors, the enlisted men and women on board, keeps them in line. And they were also incredibly impressive. Average age 19.
Right.
And I mean, he said a lot of them come from what you and I would affectionately call difficult backgrounds. Some were in gangs, some of them had trouble with the law, and they're lost. They go into the military, they go particularly in the Navy, and they try to find themselves. They tear them down and rebuild them.
Right.
And they do a wonderful job. I didn't meet one sailor, one officer, anybody on board who didn't make me proud that they're serving and fighting in defense of me. And so, they always say, write what you know.
Right.
And I'm fond of short stories that take people in our current circumstance and put them in a more unusual circumstance. And so I wondered how, ultimately, how the Bush would handle combat fighting an unknown alien attack. And so, I try to set up the scenario where that happens, and it's funny. I got the publisher, which is Martinus Publishing, which is a new and small publisher out of Maine, which means he's really freezing right now.
Yes, at least, right.
He said one of the things he liked about it, he got a lot of the submissions he got for veterans of future wars was a lot of these submissions were not positive about that. He strongly said they have to be patriotic, and not all of them were, and so that nixed them. But mine, he was pleased because mine was very patriotic. I mean, here I absolutely, as a landlubber, here I had the first time ever on a ship, that's actually not in port, and I just adored the people I met.
I want to get to this here in a moment or two with you about the fact that obviously it takes real life experience upon which you're building your stories. But back to your experiences with the George W. when you board the USS George W. Bush. The thing that I think
George
H.W. You correct? That's right.
Yes.
George H.W. Bush 41, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But in the process, and you're looking at 19-year-olds, and you realize instantly that these are youngsters that have within their capacity unbelievable, unimaginable to be exact, destructive power, and the fact that here's a warship, and it looks pretty and stately on the water. Being a squiddy, I can appreciate that, but at all times it's a potential force that could instantly be turned to kinetic force of immense power. And here you have probably, and you're talking to admirals, but the folks whose fingers are truly closest to the trigger are somewhere between the ages of 19 to 28 randomly. And that has to be impressive as well. I mean, seeing the people and recognizing the training, but also just the frame of reference.
Well, yeah, and I don't think people, and for people who've served in the military, what I'm about to say will not surprise you. Mm-hmm. But for people who don't, when you serve and you're on board a ship or doing maneuvers on land or whatever, you're constantly at risk. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot on board.
Even training,
on board a carrier.
Yeah, even training is a dangerous activity.
There are people with guns, but at one point we were on deck when they were landing jet fighters, mm-hmm. and I mean, I was as close to a landing jet fighter as I am, to the wall in front of me, which is like 6-8 feet away.
Right.
I mean, the proximity of things, if things go wrong, is incredibly close. And so you need to have situational awareness at all times that you don't mm-hmm. do something done. And I mean, I don't think people realize how important everything on board is. So let me just give an example. We did a FOD walk on deck.
A what?
Foreign object debris walk.
Okay, for a FOD. Okay.
Which means you literally, a couple hundred people walk, arm to arm down the deck of the aircraft carrier, mm-hmm. looking for debris. Mm-hmm. Debris. What qualifies as debris is anything as small as a sunflower seed pod.
Whoa.
Okay?
Wow.
I was pleased that I actually found something. But what they do how sophisticated this all is. If they find something that is metal, it goes into if you find just trash, it goes into trash. But if you find metal, well, metal came from something.
Right.
So then it goes back into maintenance and repair, and somebody has to sit there and figure out what it came from, and then they have to look at every one of the areas of the ship where it might have come from, or every one of the birds it might have come from, and say, oh, we got this bolt. Oh my gosh, because a bolt could be sucked up in an engine and destroy an engine, and you get the pilot and who knows what else killed.
Or in the process, because of the exhaust from the engines, be thrown back at somebody who's on the deck as a missile.
And not to mention the fact, those are ships and those are planes carrying explosives and things. So a fire is particularly dangerous.
Right.
And so, these are the kind of thing, if you're a history geek or military buff, consciously reading stories and seeing movies, but when you're on board, it is ever present that you are on board a warship.
And you're, as a lot of people don't appreciate, even when you're sleeping, you're on duty. So you as you point out a moment ago, you're on a warship. You are actually always positioned and prepped for having to take military action. So it's not, in spite of the theory that, well, they're just out there on a float. Well, sometimes you are, but sometimes you're also prepped for that ultimate question and a call. Dan, stay with us for a moment. We're going to take a quick break. I want to get back to the book. This is an effort on the part of the host of the Friday afternoon program, Dan Gainor, and we're going to hear more about this in just a moment here on Viewpoints on the talk station FM 107 AM 1240.
Hey, this is Ben Ball, and we'll get your morning started each weekday from 6 to 9 on Coastal Daybreak.
Viewpoints on the talk station FM 107 AM 1240. This afternoon, we're chatting with a voice you hear every Friday afternoon on the program. And no, we may bring up a subject of interest related to current news, but Dan Gainor of the Media Research Center is joining us. But this time he's joining us as an author, not as a representative of our normal Friday program. Dan, the muse has struck. You have written this. Obviously, I gather from our conversation a few moments ago, you've been writing for a while. Do you have the book, the total compendium is Veterans of the Future Wars, is that correct? Or is that
Veterans of Future Wars by Martinus Publishing? It's martinus.us. Or you can just go on to Amazon.com and look up my name, and since I've only got one thing published yet, at least in the fiction realm, it's easy to find. And there will be another anthology coming either in March or April that has more of my stuff, and like I said, I have several more stories that apparently have great potential to be published. And I'm not going to make any bones about it. This is not a big publisher.
No, but it's been literally edited by a third party. It's not a matter of self-publishing. This is an issue where you had to compete for this opportunity.
Yeah, this is an anthology, and I give the editor Martin Ingram credit since he was smart enough to buy one of my stories.
What's the title? Do you have a title for this?
My story is called Flight Deck, and if you buy the book, and this is very flattering to me, it's the first story.
Wow. All right. And by the way, you can go to Amazon and you can download it on Kindle as well as purchase it by paperback. So that's interesting as well.
Yeah. And much to Martin's credit, this is so far out of the books he said this is had the best early reception of any of the books he's done so far. And I would argue in a realm of media, this is something you and I talk about a lot.
Right.
But I mean, he's clearly trying to at least published something that's pro-military.
I want to get to that here, and we've talked about this many times before. And yes, your patriotism is pretty obvious, short of wearing it on your sleeve, which I think, quite frankly, at times I think you do, and that's a compliment.
Well, and I'm happy to do so. I'm disappointed, but my eyesight prevented me from serving. Lord knows I am nearsighted.
But wait a second. Patriotism does not have to involve the wearing of uniform. It can be any number of activities, and in fact, one of them is honoring and recognizing the contribution of military personnel and their families. By the way, that's a personal opinion of mine. I'm very strong about, as Connie Acero, my former co-host, used to point out, those that joined the military raised their right hands and volunteered. The family members, they got drafted. But I do sincerely recognize that. The question goes to the book, or pardon me, the short story. And we've talked about this in the past, and we've complained bitterly. I have, and quite frankly, you have as well, about how the media has portrayed our military and certain aspects of patriotism and those issues and cultural, I'll use the word, icons that make this country so great. Here you've made an effort, and I would challenge this as we need to see more of these kind of efforts at a variety of levels, including, I might add, and I want to get your observation on this, letters to the editor and things of this nature where people express if you will, I hate to use the term, a counter-argument. It should be the argument, but now at times it seems like it's the counter-argument. What a shame you have to qualify that description. But this is the sort of thing we need more of, is it not?
Oh, I would say absolutely, and so I mean, on a couple levels, I'm really proud that this is my first story. One, my father, who spent his entire life on land, is obsessed with reading nautical stuff. He was in the fire department, but I think in another life he must have been a sailor.
Right.
Well, he had such a collection of books about the Navy that when my parents sold their house and moved, I donated 7 boxes of books to the Naval Institute, and my father was told it was among his collection were some books that they were antiques that they had not seen before that were going into their library, but there were also a couple books that the Naval Institute had itself pulped all its copies. It didn't have any more copies, so they were able to use these copies to reset the books and recreate books that they had lost. And so I thought it particularly ironic, given that I wasn't really bitten by the Navy bug, that my first story would be about the Navy. But I would say, as somebody who is not bitten by it, I'm an incredible advocate. After I came back from the embark, I wrote a piece for FoxNews.com about the trip, about the ship. I've commented on several times since, and I look at the cover of this book, and it's an artist's conception of a redone raising of the flag at Iwo Jima, but with all the people in spacesuits, with obviously extra outer space setting in the background, which I think is a very cool idea. And I was listening this morning on my iTunes, and there's a Johnny Cash song that came on that is more one of those talky things in that song called "Ragged Old Flag." Johnny Cash, going into town and finding a local townie who's proud of their flag and how it had been damaged or harmed and throughout our country's wars. Well, if we, as our nation and ultimately our world, move into outer space, we're not going to be less reliant on the military. I think we're going to be more reliant on the military to keep us safe to new and ever complex threats. And so, I mean, I think that's the idea of the publisher of this book, is to try to get at how some of these concepts are timeless. Right. That it's not a matter of are you fighting aliens or you're fighting terrorists.
The other aspect of this is we may, as we have seen, the transition of warfare, and it's interesting. Dan, I want to get into this in here briefly before we let you go, and I thank you for being with us this afternoon. Dan Gainor, of course, you hear him every Friday afternoon, and we've got a special program with him today as an author. I want to stress that, as an author, Veterans of the Future Wars, in paperback and also on Kindle. And I just mentioned that because it's the kind of enjoyable light reading that folks who have Kindles might enjoy purchasing. By the way, the price is very reasonable, $2.99 on Kindle. The paperback right at a little over $11.50, $11.66 to be exact. But, Dan, the reality is mankind has been at warfare and at odds for centuries. We're, of course, obviously moving into the future, and outer space is one of them. As a matter of fact, we've already got discussions about the demilitarization or the militarization of the moon and discussions of that nature. I want to go to this aspect of, and you said geeky, you described yourself as a little geeky earlier. You used basically a futuristic approach. Was that the intent? Did it have to be futuristic? It says Veterans of the Future.
It would be. The title was pre-written, Veterans of the Future Wars, and so you had to take. And I took actually a current military situation and just layered on a unusual circumstance, and I mean I think that's. Frankly, that's what our military would respond to even today. And I know that while they may not talk about it much, our military has plans to defend were we ever attacked by extraterrestrials or whatever. But to me, what it all comes down to, any circumstance like that, comes down to the men and the women, not so much the ship.
Right.
It comes down to the bravery of the people. And them knowing their jobs. I'm sure people are listening right now who've been in the military are going, "Yeah, I can't believe the number of times we trained for such and such."
Right.
And it's like, well, but if you train it, then you get muscle memory.
Exactly.
You can do it in your sleep, which sometimes when you're in combat, it's almost like that's what you have to do. You've been up 24, 48 straight hours. And you can do it in your sleep.
Well, plus the fact it gives you the privilege of actually multitasking while you're doing one task. As you mentioned a moment ago, muscle memory. You have confidence that the task you're completing is proper and it's going to be successful. But at the same time, you're able to look around, determine what next actions will be taken, or possibly be prepared for a surprise. It is interesting and related to this, and I'm looking at the I got to tease it. A daring admiral seeking to save Earth's last colony ship from religious fanatics. A colony with a heavy heart facing down an alien invasion. A temporarily displaced sergeant seeking to rekindle freedom in the 31st century. These are the stories of the future wars. Did in the process of writing this, did you have a common theme? Did he advise you all of a common theme?
No, and I think his intention was. I mean, he solicited stories. His intention was to get, to come up with just sort of what he thought were the best. One of the things he seems to be doing is doing a fair number of anthologies, and the next anthology is what he called Altered America. And it's what Do
you have a short story in that as well?
I do indeed. I have that. It will be the second story in the book, and that is likely if you're a hardcore conservative, that is likely to be more thought provoking. Where it's not just talking about the military. I took a conversation I had with one of my best friends, and we were out having steak one night, and he made a comment about what the founding fathers would have thought. And we've all had this conversation. You and I have had this conversation literally probably dozens of times. Well, if the founding fathers were alive today, they would do X.
Right.
And so I thought about it and thought, well, what if they were? What if there's a way we could try to make the founding fathers alive today? How would they react? What would they do?
All right.
And who, if you had some choice in the matter, who are the founding fathers that you think are most important?
And the name of this second anthology is what? Do you have?
Actually, it's Altered America.
Altered America. Okay. So our guest this afternoon, today he's the guest, Friday he's the host, Dan Gainor. is now featured in Veterans of the Future Wars. You can go to Amazon, by the way. Eventually, I'm sure it'll show up in bookstores as well. Veterans of the Future Wars, but also coming up soon. And the name of this next book is going to anthology will be
Altered America.
Altered America.
And that's a pretty obvious.
Yeah.
You take the existence of America and tweak it in some way or another. Alternative history has been popular. Really goes back to people sort of re-envisioning if suppose the South had won the Civil War, suppose Hitler had won World War II, at all. I sort of put mine to the future as opposed to the past, but you could have easily done the other as well.
I'm looking forward to seeing I've not had the opportunity. I know it was just released recently. And before we wrap things up, what kind of time do you put into these books? I mean, when do you do your writing?
Well, for me, I've just been. The editor's been running a writing contest where had sort of like competition rounds where we've been writing a short story once a week. But for me, generally, because I write otherwise, a short story might take me 2 weeks.
Wow.
It's funny, I had written half of my story prior to knowing that he was looking for the Altered America stories, and then saw that announcement online and hastily, really put the nose to the grindstone so I could kind of get that story to him ahead of time, beat to beat other people.
Got you covered.
And I think it was the first one to actually submit something for it. And that's because I had a story in the works that really matched up well.
Interesting.
But I guess one thing I do want to say to people, I mean, look, although I write for a living, I've not written fiction before. If you think you have something interesting to say, fiction or nonfiction, this is a time when you can get published, but you have to put the work to it, and you have to be willing to embrace more rejection than a nerdy guy going to a bar filled with supermodels. I mean, it is all you get are kicks in the teeth until finally someone doesn't kick you in the teeth. They pat you on the back,
or you continue to edit and work at it, and basically, as I like to use the word, wordcraft. You become a wordsmith. You learn how to use the language and sentence structure and all the other activities. Dan, I want to congratulate you on this one. Dan Gainor, of course, of the Media Research Center, and we talk to him every Friday. As a matter of fact, we'll be talking to him again this Friday about, a variety of things, including, national health care. But we won't belabor that point today. We're just talking instead about issues of the future. And, of course, the book Veterans of the Future Wars. And, again, online at Amazon.com and Kindle, only $3, $2.99. What a deal. Dan, congratulations.
Thank you. And I really appreciate the time here. And certainly I hope everybody enjoys it as much as I enjoyed writing.
With this weather, what better thing to do than sit back and enjoy a nice book in front of a warm fire?
There is that. I mean, really, in all seriousness, if you want to cuddle up with a book, this is the time to do so. So thank you.
Dan, thank you for being with us. Stay with us for you. We'll chat with you briefly. Of course, you're listening to Viewpoints here on the Talk Station, FM 107, AM 1240.
On Swap Shop, we appreciate our listeners.
Hi, this is Angela, and I've used Swap Shop several times, and I also have bought items. And I just wanted to say thank you very much.
John, my name's David. I had called you Saturday morning with that particular item to sale. Within 3 minutes, I received a phone call, and I sold it within 5 minutes. Thank you very much for the service that you provide for all of us here in Eastern Carolina.
Excellent service, unmatched in the radio field. What a service. Thank you for your help.
Listen every Saturday for great deals and maybe even some free stuff. Better than that, you might find a way to help a neighbor. Call and be part of Swap Shop 2 with items to buy, sell, trade, or give away. That's Swap Shop on Saturdays, 7 a.m. and Swap Shop Light on Mondays and Fridays from 8:30 to 9 a.m. right here on the Talk Station. You can list beds and boats, baseball bats, cars, computers, a church bazaar, a yard sale, a main sale.